Chagim Uzmanim L'Sason, sacred seasons of our joy. We're all just getting settled, making sure everybody made it into the room. And welcome to Congregation Beit Simchat Torah, New York City's LGBTQ synagogue. We're so glad that you're here tonight to celebrate the coming of Shavuot with us here at CBST's Tikkun Leil Shavuot. This evening, we are action-packed. We'll begin with our Mariv service led by myself. I'm Rabbi Yael Rapport, and our Director of Social Justice Programming, Rabbi James. From our Mariv service, which will include a tiny snippet, the chanting of Megillat Ruth, appropriate for the season, and the laning of the 10 Commandments, we will have a study session led by our senior rabbi, Rabbi Sharon Kleinbaum, from 9 to roughly 9:50 p.m. Jewish Standard Time. And then in the 10 o'clock hour and the 11 o'clock hour, you have your choice. Imagine an enormous smorgasbord of dairy or dairy-free offerings laid before you. If you go to www.est.org/Shavuot, you have a reminder of all of the course offerings, and the Zoom links are right there for you. 3 classes in the 10 o'clock hour, 3 classes in the 11 o'clock hour, and then we all come back to this very Zoom room for a l'chaim and some blintzes or some cheesecake or some ice cream or anything with cashew milk that our hearts desire. Tonight, to be with us for our Mariv service, all you need is Sidur B'chol Levavcha, which is CBST's own Siddur. We're following along in the Mariv service, and then we'll jump to the special offerings for our Yom Tov service. And we will be sharing in prayers as evening falls, and then honoring this sacred season of Shavuot, of harvest, and of Matan Torah, the receiving and the revelation of sacred text. So, is everybody comfortable? We begin with the lighting of festival lights on page 39. And as you're reaching for your candle blessings, please raise your voices along with Rabbi James as we sing Eitz Chaim hi l'machazikim ba, v'tomcheha me'ushar. It is a tree of life to those who hold it fast, and all who cling to it find happiness.
Eitz Chaim hi l'machazikim ba, v'tomcheha me'ushar, deracheha darchei noam, v'chol netivoteha shalom. Hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva, chadesh yameinu kekedem.
In our CBST Siddurim, we're on page 39 for Hadlakat Nerot Shel Yom Tov. This is candle lighting, particularly for a sacred day. And if you have candles at home, we invite you to light them at this time as Rabbi James leads us in their blessing with the special sacred sound of Yom Tov Nusach, tuning our ears to the music of the season.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Yom Tov.
Amen. And we all sing together the words of Shehechianu. We give thanks and praise that we were sustained and brought together for this sacred occasion. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehecheanu v'kimanu v'hegianu lazman hazeh. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehecheanu v'kimanu v'hegianu lazman hazeh. Amen. We enter into our Mariv service and we are called with the words of Baruch Hu. We turn to page 78 in CBST's Sidur B'chol Levavcha, and we rise in body and in spirit.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. Praised are you, eternal one, our God, ruler of all time and space, whose word brings on the evening dusk. With wisdom you open the gates of dawn. With understanding you make time pass and seasons change. You arrange the stars in the sky according to your plan. You create day and night, rolling light into darkness, darkness into light. Umavir yom umevi laila, umavdil ben yom uven laila, Adonai tzvaot shemo, El chai v'kayam tamid yimloch aleinu leolam vahed, Baruch atah Adonai, Amari v'aravim.
Amen. Page 86 for Ahavat Olam. Ahavat Olam, Beit Yisrael, Amcha ahavta. Torah u'mitzvot, chukim u'mishpatim, otanu limadeta. Al kein Adonai Eloheinu, b'shochbeinu u'v'kumenu, nasiach b'chukecha, v'nismach b'divrei Toratecha, u'v'mitzvotecha, le'olam va'ed. Ki hem chayenu ve'orech yameinu, ve'orech yameinu. Uvahem negei yomam v'layla, yomam v'layla. Never take your love from us. Praised are you, ever-present one, who loves your people Israel.
Amen. We turn to the Shema on page 88, and we sing the central tenet of our faith. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha v'chol levavecha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol meodecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi metzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'veitechta u'v'lechtecha v'derech ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. And we continue with crossing the sea, which we just did 49 days ago. Don't know how I know that number off the top of my head. With Micha Mocha on page 94, and using a melody that is specifically for Shavuot, Akdemut. ומלכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם משה ומרים ובני ישראל, לחנו שירה בשמחה רבה ויאמרו כולם, מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, נורא תהילות עושה פלא, מלכותך ראו בניך, בוקע ים לפני משה ומרים, זה אלי ענו ויאמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב, וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני, גאל ישראל.
Amen.
And as in every evening service, we sing Hashkivenu, and we pray that I always think of my tallis, but that the wings of the divine are covering us, and that we are always raising out our divine extensions of God's wings over others around us, no matter whether it's in the New York City subway or elsewhere, where there are people who need our protection, or there are places when we need protection. And we pray that we will all go to sleep in safety tonight, and that everyone we love will rise up again tomorrow morning. Page 98. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, v'hamidenu malkeinu l'chaim, ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך, ותקננו בעצה טובה מלפניך, והושיענו למען שמך, והושיענו למען שמך. Remind us that if we are to be at peace at night, we must take heed of how we live by day. Grant us the peace that comes from honest dealing, so that no fear of discovery will haunt our sleep. Rid us of resentments and hatreds that rob us of the peace we crave. Ushmor tzeitenu vo'enu l'chaim u'l'shalom me'ata v'ad olam, ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך, סוכת שלומך. ברוך אתה אדוני, הפורש סוכת שלום, עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל, ועל כל העמים, ועל ירושלים. And today for our festival on page 102, we chant the verse from Leviticus in which Moses proclaims the festivals to all of Israel, to our entire Jewish people in every generation and in every land. וידבר משה את מועדי אדוני אל בני ישראל.
Following the recitation of Chatzi Kaddish, which will be found on page 104, we have an opportunity for silent and individual expression of prayer. And for this evening's Mariv service, if you're following along in Sidor B'chol Levavcha, you can jump ahead to page 266, the specific formulation of Amidah for festival occasions. Marge Piercy's interpretation of the Amidah that begins on page 124 in her Words of Poetry is appropriate for every occasion. And it's also an invitation to be searching the words of your heart instead of the words on any page. And so we begin with Chatzi Kaddish on page 104, and then the silent Amidah for festivals can be found on page 266.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה.
Amen.
בימה דברי חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון ובימיכון ובחייך בית ישראל, בעגלה בעגלה ובזמן קריב וימרו.
Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevorach, Le'olam U'omei Omaya Yitbarach.
יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקודשה.
Brichu.
לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, תמירן בעלמא ואמרו.
Amen. We offer a prayer for peace, peace that falls in every time zone, in every geographic location, peace to come over our chat once we remove all the hateful comments, and peace to all who entered this room tonight. May you know wholeness and completion. Oh, say shalom bimroma. Uyase shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael. Ve'imru, imru, amen. Oh, say shalom bimroma. shalom aleinu ve'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'imru amen. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. Oh, say shalom bimroma. Yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen. Tonight is a night of inclusivity and welcome. It's a night about someone who chose a community, a family, a partnership, and an identity to be true to themselves. We read on Shavuot, one of the most holy days of the Jewish year, the day that we received the entirety of the Torah. What do we read from it on this night? Is the Book of Ruth, the story of one who was most marginalized, outside of any boundary. And through the story, relationships and partnerships are built, communities' arms open, and lessons are repeated over and over again. Make space for everyone who is in need. Make space for all who want to join you. And so tonight, we will be studying the Book of Ruth in many, many senses. And we open with a chanting of just one line, one of the most powerful from chapter 1. And so Rabbi James will be chanting in the trope of Megillat Ruth, chapter 1, verse 16.
And I'll just preface it by saying that I am so grateful to everyone who is here from CBST. Where we all go, I will go. Where you go, I will go. Where I go, hopefully you will go. And the community that we build together just is beautiful and glowing and sparkling. And I am very grateful. If you have the book, the verse from Ruth is on page 250. ותאמר רות, אל תפגעי בי, לעוזבך לשוב מאחרייך, כי אל אשר תלכי אלך, ובאשר תליני אלין, עמך עמי, ואלוהיך אלוהי. And Ruth said to Naomi, "Do not force me to leave you, to turn away from you. For wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you sleep, so I will sleep. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God." And we complete this section on page 138 with Kaddish Shalem. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה.
Amen.
ויעמד דברי חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחיי חון ובימי חון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב וימרו.
Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevorach Le'olam U'amei Homaya Yitbarach.
יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקודשה.
Brichu.
לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תשבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן ביעלמה ויאמרו.
Amen.
תתקבל צלותיכון ובאותיכון דכל ישראל, קדם אבוהון דבשמיא ויאמרו.
Amen.
Yehi shlama Rabbi min Shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imeru.
Amen.
Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imeru.
Amen. Tonight, we read from our Sefer Torah, the giving of Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 Commandments. And this is a transcendent moment, not just for Shavuot, but at CBST specifically. This is a tender and sweet tradition that we have held over years and years long. And so to prepare us for this moment, as he has for decades, I want to invite Michael Levine to set the stage and to have us all stand at Sinai once more. Michael, can we hear you?
Yes, thank you, Rabbi. As we begin our observance of Shavuot, we recreate symbolically our symbolic reenactment of Revelation at Sinai, which we have done for many, many years. This is how we guarantee that every member of the congregation will experience Revelation and will be in time with the Torah. We have done this for many years because throughout history, gay men, lesbians, bisexuals, transgenders, women, people of color have been denied access to the Torah. At CBST, since our very beginning, in every sanctuary we have ever prayed, we have always had our doors open so that everyone can experience revelation and everyone can have time at the Torah. Our process is a very simple one. I'm going to ask for a moment if you can rise in your place. And because we are virtual, experience the ark being opened, experience our Torah being removed, and experience the Torah being circulated around the room from person to person as it makes a complete circle around the sanctuary. In this way, everyone has the opportunity to first receive Torah and then pass it on to the next one, the next person, to give Torah. Put your hand on your heart for 1 second. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. And for just a moment, experience receiving Torah. Feel yourself at Sinai. Feel yourself in the moment of revelation. You may tarry for a moment. The Torah is dear. Take advantage of the moment you have with Torah. But you must give it to the person next to you. We must always remember that we receive Torah. That is what revelation is all about. And we give Torah. That is what Judaism is all about. In this way, every member of our congregation has experienced revelation at Sinai. Every member of our congregation has both received and performed the mitzvah of giving Torah. Someday in the future, in the very near future, we hope that we will be able to once again practice this very brief ritual in our sanctuary and all be together to pass the Torah around the room. In the meantime, may I wish everyone Chag Shavuot Sameach. Thank you.
Chag Sameach, Michael, and thank you. And so as we step forward into the space of Torah, receiving it personally, receiving it communally, we pray, Pitchu li sharei tzedek, open for me the gates of righteousness, from Psalm 118.
Pitchu li sharei tzedek, pitchu li sharei tzedek, avovam, avovam, odeya. Pitchu li sharei tzedek, pitchu li sharei tzedek, avovam, avovam, odeya. זה השער לאדוני, זה השער לאדוני. צדיקים, צדיקים, צדיקים יבואו בו. זה השער לאדוני, זה השער לאדוני. צדיקים, צדיקים, צדיקים יבואו בו. עודך כי עניתני, עודך כי עניתני, באתי לי לישועה. עודך כי עניתני, עודך כי עניתני, באתי לי לישועה. אבן מסו הבונים, הייתה לראש פינה. אבן מסו הבונים, הייתה לראש פינה. מאת אדוני הייתה זאת, היא נפלט בעינינו. מאת אדוני הייתה זאת, היא נפלט בעינינו. זה היום עשה אדוני, נגילה ונשמחה בו. זה היום עשה אדוני, נגילה ונשמחה בו.
Tonight, chanting the 10 Commandments in their special public reading mode, it's our pleasure to invite Jonathan Adler to bless and share this Torah reading special for the holiday of Shavuot. One of the unique blessings of Zoom is that we can all stand at the Torah together. There is enough space for all of us to look closely and to see the way that the Torah scroll itself is a work of art. So Jonathan, can we hear you this evening?
Good Yontiv, Chag Shavuot Sameach.
Go right ahead when you're ready, Jonathan.
Baruch Hu or La'asok b'divrei Torah?
Start with Baruch Hu, thank you.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamavorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Kidshanu b'mitzvotav Asher Natan Lanu Torah Emet v'chayolam Nata b'tochenu. Baruch Ata Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Vayered Moshe el ha'am vayomer aleihem vayedaber Elohim et kol hadvarim ha'ele lemor Anochi Adonai Elohecha asher hotzeticha me'eretz Mitzrayim mibeit avadim lo yihye lecha Elohim acherim al panai lo ta'aseh lecha fesel v'chol tmuna asher bashamayim mimal va'asher ba'aretz mitachat v'asher b'mayim mitachat la'aretz Lo tishtachaveh lahem velo ta'ovdeim ki anochi Adonai Elohecha Elkana poked avon avot al banim al shleshim ve'al ribaim lesonai ve'oseh chesed la'alafim le'ohavai Ulashomrei mitzvotai. Lo tisa et Shem Adonai Elohecha lashav, ki lo yinache Adonai et asher yisa et Shemo lashav. Zachor et Yom HaShabbat lekodesho, sheshet yamim ta'avod, v'asita kol melachtecha, vayom HaShavi Shabbat l'Adonai Elohecha. Lo ta'aseh kol melacha ata uvincha uvitecha avadecha va'amatecha uvhimtecha v'gerecha asher bish'arecha ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim ve'et haaretz et hayam ve'et kol asher bam vayanach bayom hashvi'i al kein berach Adonai et yom hashabbat vayikadeshehu kabed et avicha ve'et imecha lema'an ya'arichun yamecha al ha'adama asher Adonai Elohecha noten lach. Lo tirtzach, lo tin'af, lo tignov, lo ta'aneh v'reacha eid shaker, lo tichmod beit reecha, lo tachmod eshet reecha, ve'avado va'amato v'shoro v'chamoro, v'chol asher l'reecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you. It's such an honor to share these words tonight with everyone. Thank you.
In this space of receiving great wisdom, we offer the Kaddish de Rabbanan. Rabbi James will introduce it and then lead us on page 254.
So we especially do the Kaddish de Rabbanan on Shavuot because of the paragraph in the middle on page 255 that says, "May our teachers and their students and the students of their students and all who study Torah here and everywhere receive peace and love, sustenance and redemption from God who is in heaven and on earth." And on this, the holiday of receiving Torah, and Michael Levine has in the past handed Torahs to me, and I have handed Torahs to many of you. So literally, many of us in this room have literally given Torah to each other, whether that is through teaching or physical Torahs. And on Shavuot, we especially want to acknowledge our teachers and our students, our teachers' teachers, and those who will be our students' with this honor. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
V'yamad yivrach yirtei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon uvyamechon uv'chayei dechal beit Yisrael ba'agala uvizman kari v'imru Amen.
Amen.
Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam alamei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei dekudesha
Brichu.
Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran v'alma v'imru
Amen.
Al Rabbanan v'al Talmidehon v'al kol Talmidehon v'al kol man askin ba'oraita di v'atrav haden v'di v'chol atar v'atar yehei lehon u'lechon shlama rabba china v'chista v'rachamim v'chayin arichin u'mizonei revichei u'porkana min kadam avuhon di v'ishmaya v'imru Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru
Amen.
Oseh shalom b'mramav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru. Amen.
Amen. And we close with these words composed by Debbie Friedman, the great Jewish LGBTQ songwriter. we ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say, Amen. We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say, Amen. We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say, Amen. We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say, Amen.
And
Words of Torah are sweeter to us than milk or honey. They sustain us and they nurture us. And so we cling to them, as Ruth clung to Naomi, as we cling to our traditions and to one another, no matter what history or modernity or the present moment brings. It's a tree of life, and we hold it fast.
Etz chaim hi v'machazikim ba v'tomcheha meushar deracheha darchei noam v'chol netivoteha shalom hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva Chadesh Chadesh Yameinu Kikedem. And I will just say that I saw a photo today that a friend took in Central Park of a sign on a tree that said, "Hug me." And the first thing I thought was, oh, it's a tree of life to those who hold fast to it. A tree in Central Park that says, "Hug me," is a very Jewish tree on Shavuot.
Our service begins its slow conclusion on page 140 with the words, Aleinu l'shabeach.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'Adon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית.
Shebara otanu b'tzalmo v'nafach banu et nishmat chayenu. Shehenik otanu limud torato v'kideshanu b'mitzvoteha.
ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא שהוא נוטה שמיים ועושה את הארץ ומושב עיקרו בשמיים ממעל ושכינתו זו בגבי מרומים הוא אלוהינו אין עוד אמת מלכנו אפסולתו ככתוב בתורתו וידעת היום והשבותיו אל לבבך כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד כן נקווה לך אדוני. We turn the page. We hope that soon the day will come when all will experience the fullness of your glory, when despair shall disappear and destruction shall be no more, when corruption and evil shall give way to integrity and goodness, when the great variety of humans dwelling on the earth shall come together to repair your world. ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא, יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
A poem by Muriel Reichkaiser. When I am dead, even then, I will still love you. I will wait in these poems. When I am dead, even then, I am still listening to you. I will still be making poems for you out of silence. Silence will be falling into that silence. It is building music. Tonight, as we honor the receiving of what is sacred, what is holy, what is important teaching, words of art and words of poetry, we honor the legacy of those who brought poetry and words and teaching and holiness in our lives. And so we invite you, if you are reciting Kaddish for someone whose mourning period is recent, if you just lost somebody, if you are observing the Jewish mourning periods of Shiva or Shloshim, if it's the yortzeit of someone you love and it is your custom to be standing when Kaddish is recited, please rise and please hold their name in your heart, their face as for frontlet between your eyes, and imagine that you are reaching out your hand towards them. Yitgadal v'yitkadash meraba. Ve'alma divrach yiruteh ve'amlich malchuteh. V'chayechon u'vyomechon u'vchaye dechol beit Yisrael. Ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehei shmei rabba mevarach le'olam u'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal. Shemei dekudsha brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tush b'chata v'nechemata. Da'amiran be'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. V'imru. Amen.
Amen.
Oseh shalom bimromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. V'imru. Amen.
Amen.
May the one who makes peace in the heavens make peace here on earth and make us peacemakers with the courage and the tenacity and the persistence to effect peace in all we know. Oseh shalom bimromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imeru. Amen. We have gathered here for teaching and for learning. It is my honor, just as we promised her at 8:50 p.m., to invite Rabbi Sharon Kleinbaum, the senior rabbi of Congregation Beit Simchat Torah, to open our Tikkun Leil Shavuot, our study sessions tonight with a teaching on the Book of Ruth, and many, many thanks to all of those who participated in the service tonight, to Jonathan for his beautiful laning, to Michael for his gorgeous scene setting, to Rabbi James, with whom it is a pleasure to lead, and everyone behind the scenes that makes our Zooming Zoom.
And
Rabbi
to Rabbi
Kleinbaum.
Rapport for leading us fearlessly through. Thank you. 8:50 indeed.
Thank you so much to Rabbi Rapport and to Rabbi James and to rabbinical student, beloved Jonathan Adler, and to beloved past CBST President Michael Levine for all of your contributions to tonight's service. And for those of you who are watching with us on Zoom, I know we all share the horror and the disappointment and anger and outrage at the anti-gay comments. We were Zoom bombed tonight with horrible anti-gay violence in the words. We shut down the chat so that they could not continue, but apparently we don't know how to actually delete them. So if anybody out there does know how to delete them, let us know, but we don't know. So they're there as kind of neon signs that really reflect the hatred that exists in the world today. And that's why we don't allow our Zoom rooms to stay open after we start classes in order to eliminate this possibility. but it's a real part of the world in which we live. And I offer anybody I think we've gotten rid of all the people who, and we've deleted them from our Zoom time tonight. But if you want to say these disgusting things, just write me at rabbi@cbst.org, and I'm happy to have a conversation with you. In my experience, the people who say things like this are usually struggling with their own gay identity. So usually they need a lot of help. And when this heckling has happened to me in the past, of course, we've now shut them down. I usually have said that publicly to the hecklers, that usually it's a sign that they themselves are gay, which is a really effective way to shut down anti-gay hecklers, just as a tip for anybody who deals with anti-gay hecklers. But this is why we have to ask you to always give your full names when you come onto Zoom, and why we try not to. They got in anyhow because we let a whole group in at the beginning of the class, but we really can't at the beginning of the service, so that we could go through people one by one. This is why we can't let you in if your Zoom name is iPad. We can't do it because we don't know if it's Randy Sarakoff or some, neo-Nazi. Lahavdil Elef Havdalas. Anyway, so thanks for bearing with us. Don't let it get into your soul. There's a lot of hatred out there, and our job is to keep just sending out love and light, and knowing that anybody that says the things that these people are saying in our chat are usually they're struggling with it in themselves, right? And they're showing their own tormented sense of self-hate by projecting it onto us. So if anybody is suffering because of reading any of that stuff, I'm giving you a big Zoom hug. Don't take it personally. These people don't deserve your energy. So let's all give each other a hug, okay? How about we all do some hugging? And if we're all vaccinated, we're going to be doing this very soon. So let's give some hugs. And, the way to revelation is rocky. There's a lot of hard work to get there. And it's part of what we have to deal with, hatred in the world, right? So I'm hoping everybody's okay. And, let's move on, right? So a few things tonight we're all going to be studying through different prisms, through different angles, through different perspectives, the Book of Ruth. As some of you remember, we used to stay up all night long at CBST when we were in Bethune Street. We had Israeli dancing at about 3 o'clock in the morning to really get us going. And there's nothing like Israeli dancing at 3 o'clock in the morning when you're so punchy you can't stop giggling. And then we would go out to the river because we were down by the Hudson, and we would do the blessing for the moon. Rabbi Yael Cohen taught us there's a very special dance to do, which you're very punchy. And then we would daven by the river and then come back to Bethune Street for the Torah reading, then for some schmear and bagels. And that was our tikkun. So we've had to adjust to life in general. We stopped doing an all-night tikkun a few years ago, and here we are on Zoom all together. The advantage, of course, we're all in our pajamas doing Zoom tikkun. I'm not going to ask to see what your pajamas look like, and we're doing it till midnight, not all night long. And after I teach, there'll be 2 sessions. One session from 10 to 10:50 or 11 o'clock-ish, and the other from 11 to 11:50, 12 o'clock-ish. And there are 3 sessions in each. And I know most of you have registered for one of them. If you haven't, I don't know what to tell you to do. Can we post that in the chat without letting other people post in the chat? I don't know how that works. Maybe we can
go to cbst.org/Shavuot, and you wait very, very patiently in the waiting room as our moderators let in one person by one person by one person. We promise you will get in there. And especially if you're someone known to CBST, you'll waltz your way right in.
Yeah.
But we ask everybody for extended patience tonight. We got all night till midnight.
Yep. You might wonder, where did the idea of an all-night tikkun come from? Well, this is one of my favorite Jewish midrashim of all time. I could tell you some beautiful ideas that there's midrashim about the heavens open up more at midnight. There's a sense of closeness. by not sleeping, where it's like a sleep fast, like we do a food fast on Yom Kippur. But the Midrash I love the best is that on the very day of Sinai, the Jews overslept. Can you imagine? There they are at Sinai and they overslept getting up for the revelation. So I love that explanation. Anyway, so for all of you oversleepers, and I'm one of them, this holiday is for you. It's so we don't oversleep. But anyway, we now do it in this a little adjusted way. So in this particular Shavuot, in which we have witnessed in this past week, and honestly this past month, an explosion of violence and hatred in Israel and Palestine, and levels of hostility and polarization, and Facebook is just full of, and all social media is just full of everybody condemning everybody else. We hear voices of those in the Jewish community that say that what Hamas is doing is trying to destroy the Jewish people and Israel, which I actually agree with. I agree with that. And it's all the Palestinians' fault. And we hear those on the Palestinian side saying things that are also, there's truth to it, that Israel has oppressed Palestinians for years and decades. And in this last month, fascist elements of the Israeli government, the Kahanist party, set up office in Palestinian East Jerusalem in order to inflame them during Ramadan. And other things were done during Ramadan to inflame Palestinians, and now there is a complete eruption. So we're watching the complete deterioration, honestly, of what maybe was just a veneer of calm that only some people experienced and many people did not. On Shavuot, it is also the tradition that King David died. And as a result of the tradition that Shavuot is the date of death for King David, for some people, during the Tikkun and during Shavuot itself, they study the entire Book of Psalms in honor of the yortzeit, of the death date of King David. Psalms, as everybody here knows, I think, very, very important book to me. And I've been reciting a lot of Psalms these last few days in the midst of the terrible violence, the violence that's happening in the streets and the violence that's happening in social media. I have put on my phone the app that notifies me every time a rocket comes into Israeli airspace that every Israeli has on their phone. So to remind me of what the pressure is like for Israelis who live in the region around Gaza, but all the way up north as well. And every time that alert comes in, if you're not familiar with it, if you've lived in Israel, you know about it. The alert tells you how many seconds you have before the rocket will hit the ground if it passes through the anti-defense system called Iron Dome. If you live on what's called the envelope around Gaza, you have 5 seconds from the time the siren goes off to the time you have to be in a shelter. If you live in Tel Aviv, you have 90 seconds. And that's considered a long time to have 90 seconds to have to get into. So I keep this on my phone and it goes off all the time so that I remind myself, I'm not living it. I'm not the one who has to run to a shelter, but it's on us to really feel and to be aware of the pain. A Palestinian friend of mine in New York, who's from the village of Beit Hanina, which is virtually part of Jerusalem, but it's a little outside of Jerusalem, sent me a video today of a Jew with a kippah standing in the middle of Beit Hanina with a gun, with an automatic weapon, shooting any Arabs he could identify in cars as they drove by him on the street. That's from today. That's from a Jew who calls himself a religious Jew with a rifle or an automatic weapon shooting into cars. How do we carry this level of pain? How do we respond? I say Tehillim right now. And I also look for the places that exist of those Jews and Arabs who are trying so hard to break through the narratives of hate. But so I want to start our tikkun together with Psalm 122, which is the psalm in which we pray for the peace of Jerusalem and of course, the region. We pray, Shalu Shalom Yerushalayim. Though we pray for peace, those who love Jerusalem, those who love the land, and we pray that there will be a peace, not just a peace in which there's a ceasefire, but then a peace in which there's really peace and justice, where Palestinians are given the respect and honor and justice they deserve, and where Israeli Jews can live in peace and in dignity as well. Fewer and fewer people are holding up these two things as goals. We must never, ever, ever abandon that. So to start our tikkun tonight, we will start with Psalm 122, and we're going to play a version of it which is set to music. But if you have a book of Psalms with you, or you can look it up, Psalm 122, the Psalm for the peace of Jerusalem. In the Siddur, these words from the psalmist remind me of our prayers for peace and our... We can't hear anything. Prayers for this, that for the sake of your holy house, we seek only your good. Peace be with you, Jerusalem. Page 120. Can anybody hear anything? Jason, I can't hear anything. Jason, it's totally silent. It's not working.
Sam is playing back the video.
That's me.
And that might be why we're having.
Me sharing it. That's very unusual because I have it saying share sound and everything, so I'm not sure. It's very unusual. This happened
during the Seder,
before.
And some of us could hear and some of us couldn't. And it was a very at Sinai moment because everybody was hearing something different.
That's very unusual. All right, I can try one more time.
Let's try one more time.
It's very unusual. Okay.
Remind me of our prayers for peace and our
nope, Sam, we still don't hear it.
For the sake no sound. Of the holy house, we seek only your good. Peace.
And I know that some people can hear sound. This might be dependent on your version of Zoom that was updated more or less recently.
Okay, so let's read the psalm, which is in our CBST Siddur. Let's, there it is. I just heard something. Did I just hear it or no?
I don't think so.
Oh, that was just in my sad little mind. Okay, it is in the CBST Siddur. What?
And we're screen sharing.
Okay, it's on page 120 of the CBST Siddur, and I'll recite it first in Hebrew, and then we'll recite it in English. And I want everybody in your, keep silent, but it's really important to say the psalm if you have the words in front of you, or you, oh, there they are on the screen. Do we have, is Yael, who's, or Ben here, are usually Psalms class Hebrew readers? So we hear the Israeli Hebrew? No, okay, I'll read it. Shir HaMalot LeDavid, Samachti be'omrim li Beit Adonai Nelech, Omdot hayu ragleinu b'sharayich Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim habnuya ki'ir shechubra la yachtav, Shesham alu shivatim shivteya, Edut liYisrael lahudot l'shem Adonai, Ki shama yashvu kisot lemishpat kisot leveit David, Sha'alu shalom Yerushalayim, Yishalu ohavayach, Yehi shalom b'chelech shalva ba'armonotayach, Leman achai v're'ai adabra na shalom bach. Leman beit Adonai Eloheinu avaksha tov lach. A song of ascent of David. Joy filled me when I heard, let us go to the house of the Eternal. Finally, our feet will stand within your gates, Jerusalem. Yerushalayim, a city rebuilt, a city where all are welcome, united together in harmony. Here worshipers would go to give thanks to the Nameless One. Here was the place of David's justice. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May all who love you be well. May there be peace and well-being within your walls, tranquility within your dwelling places. For the sake of kinfolk and friends, I call out now peace. Peace be with you, Jerusalem. For the sake of your holy house, I will seek only your good. That's Psalm 122. And if you have the CBST Siddur, it's in the Siddur on page 120, and it's chapter 122 of the book of Psalms. So we pray for this peace, and we know these are going to be very, very rough days in which cynical and corrupt leaders of both Palestinians and sadly of Jews will use these events for their own political end and not for coming to a resolution of peace. And we know that there will be an unleashing of anti-Semitism and of hatred. And we, in our community, have to focus on being a source of light and of love and of maintaining the possibilities of hope no matter what. So the Book of Ruth, which is the Megillah, there are the Megillot of the Tanakh, of our sacred texts, of the Jewish Bible. There are Megillot which are assigned to each of the major festivals and some of the minor ones. And Ruth is assigned to the holiday of Shavuot. Now, there are only two books in the whole Bible that are named for women. One is Esther and the other is Ruth. So that makes it feel a little special anyway. There's another book that called the Book of Judith, which is not part of the Jewish canon. So before you ask me, what about the Book of Judith? It's not technically part of the canon of the Jewish Bible. So I get to say there are only two, Esther, which we read on Purim, and Ruth, which we read on Shavuot. There are a lot of discussions about why this book is assigned to the holiday, assigned to the holiday of Shavuot. So let me just say a few of them as an introduction, because throughout tonight's sessions, we're going to be studying the Book of Ruth in all different kinds of ways. So first of all, the book itself is set at the harvest time. This is a harvest holiday. Shavuot has, as most of the major Jewish holidays, two features. One is that it celebrates something agricultural because we come from an agricultural people. And the second is that it celebrates or observes something related to something historical. So for us, for Shavuot, it is the harvest festival. We have, of course, been counting the Omer, 49 days from Pesach to Shavuot. So the Book of Ruth is set at a time of harvest. So the story itself is relevant to this moment in time. The second reason that's often given, and there are many, many, I'm going to just say a few, is that the Ruth is seen as the ancestor of David himself. And David is considered David died on Shavuot, and David is significant. So the connection between Ruth and to David is significant. And it's also significant because Ruth was not born an Israelite. So Ruth accepts the identity of being part of this people in the story of Ruth. And the story of Shavuot itself, the historical part of the story, is the Israelite people accepting the Torah as a people. So Ruth, the story of Ruth's journey on an individual micro level, parallels the story for us as a people. And so there's the taking on of the Torah as a source of identity and of guidance and of wisdom by Ruth as an individual in this story. So those are three of the big reasons. And of course, Sinai is the time that we're taught. When does Sinai take place? Is for these 40 days after leaving Egypt, or 50th day after leaving Egypt. Ruth is a book about a non-Jewish woman. It celebrates the wisdom and the story of somebody who is not born part of a people. So many people see the Book of Ruth as also telling the story of how we treat outsiders and how outsiders benefit and deepen and enrich a community. This is the ultimate story. Isn't this amazing? On the holiday in which we accept the receiving, or the Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, is the same holiday we read a story about somebody who is not part of our people initially. So it's a story of welcome, of inclusion, of celebrating the immigrant, because it's a story of immigration and of fleeing economic uncertainty. And it is a story, ultimately, sof, of generosity. If there's one word that really could be used, I think, to characterize the Book of Ruth, it's about generosity. And in Ruth Rabbah, which is the Ruth Rabbah, which is the commentary on the Book of Ruth, it says very clearly, many people talk about what exactly, I want to quote directly from the Book of Ruth Rabbah, which is a very, very famous quote, which is on, where is it? I printed it out so I could read it to you. Ruth Rabbah says, what is the story about? What is the central guiding principle of the Book of Ruth? It is Gemilut Chasadim. Gemilut Chasadim, the acts of loving kindness. Ruth is not a story that one would initially think is about Gemilut Chasadim, although there's a lot of it in there, and we're going to look at what it is. But the rabbis see very clearly that the story we read, which is associated with the giving of the Torah, is a story whose main theme is acts of loving kindness. Gemilut Chasadim differs from tzedakah, or charity is, of course, a very bad translation of tzedakah. The giving of tzedakah, which is an obligation on the part of every single Jew, even poor Jews have to give tzedakah, even if it's a small amount. But tzedakah is a financial or a tangible requirement. Tzedakah is what you give when you have to, according to our tradition, it's mostly focused on helping people out of poverty. So honestly, I hate to say this to people because this always upsets people. Tzedakah is not the same thing as what's a tax deduction in US tax code, okay? Tzedakah is not the same thing as giving money to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. As worthy as that is, it's not the same thing as giving money to a wonderful music group. As worthy as that is. Tzedakah really, on Jewish law, which is a whole other conversation, is really focused on alleviating hunger and poverty. To fulfill the obligation of tzedakah in Judaism, you have to give resources, you have to give 10 to 20%, and that's a very big question, is that pre or post-tax? You have to give 10 to 20% of your income to those things that will help alleviate hunger and poverty. Wow. But the rabbis say Gemilut Chasadim is something different than tzedakah, and the Book of Ruth is about Gemilut Chasadim. Gemilut Chasadim can be done, and this is a famous example. Tzedakah can only be given to the poor. As I said, the definition of tzedakah is to alleviate hunger or poverty, but Gemilut Chasadim can be to rich and poor. Tzedakah can only be given to the living. Gemilut Chasadim can be done to the living and the dead. This is from the Gemara. Thus, helping a lame person over a stile is an act of Gemilut Chasadim, though not of tzedakah. A gift given with a scowl to a poor person may be an act of tzedakah, but it's not an act of Gemilut Chasadim. For that same gift of financial obligation and help has to be given with generosity of spirit in order to be considered Gemilut Chasadim. It's almost humorous that the rabbis point out that the only provable example of genuine altruistic Gemilut Chasadim is paying respect to the dead, because then, for there is not the unspoken thought that the recipient may one day thank you. So Gemilut Chasadim is different than tzedakah, and that's a very important concept. And I'm going to repeat what this said, that you can give tzedakah and you can be yotze your obligation to give tzedakah, and you could do it grudgingly. You could do it with a scowl. You could do it without being generous. But Gemilut Chasadim requires you to do it in a way that is full of loving kindness towards the recipient. And the Book of Ruth teaches this to us. So we're going to look a little bit briefly at, okay, here we are. Yeah. Oh, okay. Here's the exact quote from Midrash Ruth Rabbah. Sorry, I lost that piece of paper. The Megillat Ruth tells nothing either of cleanliness or of uncleanliness, neither of prohibition or permission, which is what a lot of our rabbinic literature says, of course. For what purpose was the Book of Ruth written? Midrash Ruth Rabbah asks. To teach how great is the reward of those who do acts of kindness. And there is no limit on Gemilut Chasadim. There's no maximum on what makes Gemilut Chasadim. So as I referred vaguely, tzedakah, there's a lot of debates. The Maimonides says 10% is the absolute minimum, 20% is the correct amount. There's a lot of discussions about how much money do you have to give to alleviate poor or hunger to be yotze. But Gemilut Chasadim, there's no limit. There's no limit. So we're going to look a little bit at the Book of Ruth itself to see these examples and why the rabbis are so convinced. And one of the big questions that gets asked over and over again, and I offer it to all of you, is why is Gemilut Chasadim, generosity of spirit and kindness, not letter of the law, not detail, but kindness, is at the center of Matan Torah, of the giving of Torah. And I have to say, coming to Shavuot in the middle of the nightmare the world is in, this is such a profound shiur for us, lesson for us, teaching for us. So I want to thank Harold Levine, who I think has the Sefaria of the Book of Ruth, and we're going to start at the very beginning of the first chapter. So first of all, the Book of Ruth has 4 pretty short chapters. It's a fairly short book, so it's a lot. It's very possible to digest, and it's a narrative. It's not a complicated, dense book, and there's a lot written about it. It's kind of a fun book because it has so many ways in and so much to offer us. So I just want to start going through this is chapter 1, Ruth 1. So I'm going to read through a little bit. So the first great act of Gemilut Chasadim happens in chapter 1. So first, it sets the time. And by the way, some scholars think that the Book of Ruth is set in the time of the Judges. And that's why in the Christian Bible, I'm not sure if it's both the Catholic or the Protestant Bible, but in the Protestant Bible, the Book of Ruth is in the historical books, along with the Book of Judges, because it takes place in the time of the Judges. And so we know what's happening on the macro level when you read the Book of Judges, and then you could read the Book of Ruth to hear a very personal, intimate story of some individuals. So how do we know this takes place in the time of the Judges? Vayhi bimei Shavuot HaShvotim, in the time when, here it's translated as chieftains, but judges ruled. The reason it's translating as chieftains is that this was the time in the history of the Israelites where the judges were the rulers. But this is the period of the judges, which is probably around, 1200 to 1000 before the Common Era, somewhere in that period. So we're talking about before the time of King David, before the time of King Saul. This is in that period before the time of the kings. So when the text begins and says this is the time when the judges ruled, it's locating this story in this moment in time. Okay, I know there's some probably smarty pants who's listening to me who's going to quote, there are some scholars who argue with that and place it differently. I know. But for the purposes of tonight, we're going to take what's kind of the kind of traditional way of reading it. So in the time of the Judges, around 1200 to 1000 before the Common Era. So Common Era, of course, is when Jesus lived. So we're talking 1,000 years before Christianity, 1,000 years before Jesus. There was a famine, Ra'av, a hunger in the land. And where is the land? This is a big question. Where do these people begin and where do they end up? So there was a hunger ba'aretz in the land, ba'aretz, and a man left mi Beit Lechem. Beit Lechem in Hebrew, 2 words, which means the house of bread. But in the English, we see it's Bethlehem. So where is this located? Wow, isn't this amazing? So this is very contemporary. Bethlehem, oh, go back up there. So Bethlehem is a few kilometers south of Jerusalem. And it is, of course, a largely Christian city. And it's a largely, obviously it's a Palestinian Christian city that's in the West Bank now. So when you leave Jerusalem and you go to Bethlehem, it's in the West Bank. So in Judah, Judah was the southern part of the where the tribes lived, and Judah encompassed Bethlehem and Jerusalem. So there was a man who was in Judah and Bethlehem, which was in Judah, which was the regional area, and he left with his wife and his 2 sons. So he's leaving the land of Palestine, or Israel as we know it today, and left it to go to the land of Moab. So Moab is outside of that land. The man's name was Elimelech, Haish Elimelech, and his wife's name was Naomi. He had 2 sons, Machlon v'Chilion, and they were from Bethlehem. And by the way, there is now, for those who know the West Bank, Efrat is referring to this town. Efrat which is where the rabbi from Lincoln Square on the Upper West Side moved and created a modern Orthodox community. So they're meaning this is really locating it very specifically in time and place. So they left and they went to the country of Moab. So they left their own country. Now, how many immigrants know this experience, and how many of either us or our ancestors lived in one place and left their home? And why? In this case, not because of political persecution, but because of economic persecution or economic lack of and food insecurity, which is one of the big reasons that migrations happen on our planet. Very quickly, we hear that Elimelech dies. Oh my God, this is verse 3. They've left. How many people die while they migrate from one bad circumstance to try and find freedom or food or economic security? So Naomi's husband dies, but she's left with her 2 sons. While they were in this other country, they married women there, non-Jewish women, right? They married one named Orpah and the other named Ruth. And they lived there, Ke'asar Shanim. They lived there for about 10 years. So we now know kind of time and place. They've left their home. They've moved like so many immigrants do, meet somebody, marry them, create family, or not. So the 2 sons died. The woman is left without her 2 sons and without her husband. So in other words, 3 women are left alone. And obviously in a society like this, like many societies today, the text is telling us that in some ways their security, their protection is gone. In a society like the one of 1200 years before Jesus, for 3 women to be alone without a man was both dangerous and unlikely they would be able to be successful. So she started, who's the she? Here we're talking about Naomi, started out with her daughters-in-law to return. She hears that back in her home country, there's now food. She left the place where they've been living with her 2 daughters-in-law, and they set out to go back from Moab back to Judah. But Naomi says to her 2 daughters, stay here, this is your home. Don't travel back with me back to what's my home. Go back to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you. So this is the first place in the text where we even see the word about kindness. And in Hebrew, we see chesed, which is the word from Gemilut Chasadim. So may the Lord deal kindly with you. So the first thing that Naomi does is with this generosity of spirit. These are the women who were married to her sons, but she releases them. She says, go back to your family, go back to your mother. What can I give you? And may the Holy One offer you kindness, because you have been kind, or you have dealt well with the dead and with me. Another blessing she offers them. May the Holy One, Yud-He Vav-He, the big name of God, grant that each of you find security in the house of a husband, which of course in those days, and that was necessary to be secure in the world. She kisses them. There's so much tenderness and love in this story. And they broke into weeping. Now, those of us who study the biblical Hebrew always enjoy this, because this is one of the few places in the Bible where the biblical Hebrew plural is in the feminine, which we don't see very often. But so that's just a fun little thing for those who are following the Hebrew. And they said to her, no, we will return with you to your people. But Naomi repeats it another time. No, turn back, my daughters. Why should you go with me? What do I have to offer you? You're better off. Imagine, she's losing whatever family she has at this point, and she's saying to them, have I any more sons who might be husbands for you? I can't give you anything. So turn back, my daughters, for I am too old to be married. Even if I thought there was hope for me, even if I were married tonight and I bore sons, you can't wait for them to grow up. No, my daughters, my lot is far more bitter than yours. Now here is where she feels bitterness. For the hand of the Lord has struck out against me. She's lost her husband and her sons. Again they weep a second time. And Orpah, one of the daughters-in-law, kisses her mother-in-law farewell. Verut davka ba. Now the word davka here is a really powerful word. It's used a few other times, not many, to describe relationships in the Bible. It's used with Isaac, Yitzchak, and Rivka, but it's very rare. Most relationships in our biblical text are more transactional on some level. But to use davka, which means to cling, it's like glue, literally like glue. And in Hasidic thought, we have something called dveikut, or dveikis, which is from the same shoresh. And in Hasidic thought, dveikis is the longing to cling to the Holy One, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to God, to be able to be so connected to the divine. And that's what the Baal Shem Tov said is our kind of goal, is to long for this word in relationship to God. So that's why this text, and you'll hear more about this in other sessions, has a lot to talk about this relationship between two women. Verut dafka, so she clung to her, but clung is not a big enough word. I'm sorry, in English, it's just not big enough. It's to cleave, to, is that the right word? I don't know, whatever the word is. Okay. Vatomer, and she said, now who's the she? Which she is now? So this is Naomi saying to Ruth, see, your sister-in-law has returned to her people and to her gods. There's different gods. She's gone back to her religion. Follow your sister-in-law. And here's where we encounter the classic famous words of the Book of Ruth. But Ruth, Vatomer Ruth, but Ruth said, Al tifki ivi. Do not send me away. Do not push me away. Do not urge me to leave you, to turn back and not follow you. Ki el asher telchi, because wherever you go, elech, I will go. Uva asher talini alin, and wherever you sleep, wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Amech ami, your people will be my people, velohayach Elohai, and your God will be my God. Ba'asher tamuti amut, where you die, I will die. Visham ekver ko, and there I will be buried. So this is the next profound act of Gmilut Chasadim. This is kindness. She doesn't owe her mother-in-law. She doesn't have a debt here. She's not giving her something financial. She can't offer anything financial. What she's offering is her presence, her company, being with her, not leaving her alone. going with her on her journey, being a witness to her life and committing herself to Naomi's story. So when Naomi sees how determined she was, she stopped arguing with her. And the two went on until they reached Bethlehem. So they've gone from Moab, they've gone from Bethlehem. Naomi went from Bethlehem to Moab. Her sons married, her sons died, her husband and sons died, and her daughters-in-law were left with her. And now one daughter-in-law returns with Naomi back to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole city is excited. The women said, "Can this be Naomi? Do not call me Naomi, call me Mara," which is the word for bitterness, like bitter herbs in Pesach. And she describes the deep sadness she is feeling. So in these words, in these part, the ending of chapter 1, we see what Ruth was able to see, that Naomi, although she was very generous in saying to the daughters-in-law, leave, she was in bad shape. She was grieving, she was bitter, she was grief-stricken, and Ruth said, "I'm staying with you." So Naomi returns from the country of Moab. She returns with Ruth, and they arrive in Bethlehem. Let's go down. And when do they arrive in Bethlehem? At the beginning of the barley harvest. So again, this is the second reason. This is one of the reasons that Ruth is read during Shavuot. It's the barley harvest. And look what I have on the wall behind me. See, I did that on purpose. This is my little trying to be decoratively creative. Anyway, so it's the barley harvest. So now chapter 2, and this is what we're going to do for tonight, is to look at this text, a little bit of chapter 2, looking for acts of Gemilut Chasadim. So Naomi has a relative from her husband's side whose name was Boaz, and who was, from the story as it tells us, a man of substance. So he's got resources. So Ruth said to Naomi, so the Moabite says to Naomi, right? So the daughter-in-law, "I would like to go to the fields and glean among the ears of grain behind someone who may show me" what? Chen, kindness. Another word. So we've had chesed and now chen, another word for kindness. Now you'll notice here that Ruth is describing the generosity of somebody who might be moved to offer something to help with their poverty and with their hunger, not because they are required, but because they'll be moved. They'll show some kindness. So she goes to the field. She walks behind the reapers who are harvesting the barley. And as luck would have it, the piece of land belonged to Boaz. Then Boaz comes from Bethlehem into the fields, and he greets the reapers. And this is now on the next act of chesed of the story. Here is this wealthy owner, and he's going into his fields to speak to the workers. And how does he speak to the workers? Does he say to them, "Go faster, work harder, stop your breaks"? No. This is used as a model in rabbinic literature also for how somebody is supposed to treat people who work for them, right? So the first thing he does in the fields, he offers them a blessing. He says, "Yud He Vav He Imachem, may the Holy One be with you." And they respond to him, "And may you be blessed by the Holy One." So this is the next act of chesed, which shows us here is there. So we're seeing all different people in different positions offering things to each other. That's not financial, but an act of chesed. Boaz said to the servant who's in charge of the reaper, "Whose girl is that?" The servant in charge of the reaper said, "She's a Moabite girl who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab." So the whole thing is being repeated. She said, "Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the reapers. She's been on her feet ever since she came this morning. She has rested but little." Next act of deep chesed. Boaz says to Ruth, "Listen to me, daughter. Don't go to glean in another field. Don't go elsewhere. Stay close here to my girls. Keep your eyes on the field they are reaping and follow them. I have ordered the men not to molest you. And when you are thirsty, go to the jar and drink water that the men have drawn. She lay herself down to the face to the ground and said, why are you so kind to me when I am Nochriah, a foreigner? And Boaz said, I have heard of all that you did for your mother-in-law, of the death of your husband, and how you left your father and mother to the land of your birth and came to a people you did not know. And the next act is that he offers this another blessing. May the Holy One reward your deeds. May you have full recompense from the Holy One, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have sought refuge. A profound blessing to the refugee, a profound blessing to the immigrant, a profound blessing to a poor person. And you can imagine what she must look like at this point. Tattered clothes, there are no showers. She looks poor. She is a much lower socioeconomic status than he. And she says to him, you are most kind. Chen, here's the word chen again. To comfort me. And again, this gets referred to in literature, that not only is Boaz offering the tzedakah that we talked about, offering concrete help, but he's doing it in a way that's kind. And it comforts her. And here it is, speaks gently to me, your maidservant, though I am not so much as one of your maidservants. The chapter continues and comes to a clothing that I just want to point out, so that he gives her food. He hands her roasted grain. She ate her fill, had left over. She got up to glean. Boaz says to his workers, you are not only to let her glean among the sheaves without interference, but you must also pull some stalks out of the heaps, leave them for her to glean, and not scold her. So in other words, don't just leave what drops because you can't carry everything. You must go the extra mile to leave even more, not only what drops. And by the way, this reflects some of the halachot that we see in the book of Vayikra and then through rabbinic literature about what is the obligation of Peah, of in the field, to take care of. So she gleaned in the field until evening. It was about an ephah, a certain amount of barley. She carried it back to town. And when her mother-in-law saw, she had left over after eating, and her mother-in-law asked, where did you glean? Blessed is he. So she told her mother-in-law that the name of the man with whom I work today is Boaz. And Ruth goes on, if you go down to 21, he even told me, stay close by my workers. So I'm going to stop at that point just because I want to, we have a few minutes left, but so you get this story where we've seen chesed and chen, we've seen generosity that's beyond the exact amount that's necessary. And we have this concept of gemilut chasadim being equivalent to kind of like hidur mitzvah. It's not just enough, for instance, to say kiddush on wine or grape juice in a paper cup. You would be yotze from saying kiddush on a Friday night if you used a paper cup. But in Judaism, where we have this concept of hidur mitzvah, it's not enough to just do the minimum of a mitzvah. You should make it beautiful. That's where silver workers became so important in Jewish tradition. Having a beautiful kiddush cup, it's not required to be yotze on making kiddush, but doing the extra amount creates a kind of beauty in the world that then has impact. And this story, in these first two chapters, and there's more to say if we were to continue with the final two chapters along the same line, mitzvah goreret mitzvah. You do something good in the world, and that's what this story shows us. It comes around, so to speak. You do something good, it makes you want to do more good, and then it comes back to you in different kinds of ways. And the power of kindness that this story shows us multiplies. It creates an energy. It feeds in on itself. And we see both great generosity from people who are poor. Ruth and Naomi are poor. What Ruth does for Naomi doesn't rely on the fact that she has resources to offer Naomi. Gemilut Chasadim can be done by somebody who's super wealthy. But the way they choose to use their resources can be done with generosity and with the blessings and with kindness, or it can be done in a very parsimonious and mean-spirited way. Every act we have can be done either with parsimony or with kindness and with generosity. And the Book of Ruth comes back to us over and over and over again to show us the power of Gemilut Chasadim as the act we are all, no matter what our background, are required to do. So we're told, in Peah, which are the chapters of the Mishnah, which deal with these questions of the fields and how much to leave, and the laws that are coming from the book of Vayikra. I just want to read this from Peah. The text of the Mishnah mentions the great of good works of three things. And this I'm going to then honoring one's parents. These are three things that are considered on the highest levels of the things that we can do. Honoring one's parents, Gemilut Chasadim, and bringing about peace between people and their fellows. So, wow, doesn't this kind of talk about the moment we're in today? So first of all, Gemilut Chasadim can be done by all of us at every moment. Any act we do in the world, as the Book of Ruth shows us, can either be done with generosity or with parsimony. And we're called upon by the model of this book of diving deep into generosity, kindness. We often talk about that Judaism is a religion and a tradition of doing things, not a belief system, and that's true. But we don't often talk about, and we should, the role that kindness has in Jewish practice. We sometimes overly focus on the Vayikra part of Peah, but Ruth brings us such depth about the generosity piece of what it looks like. Both the relationship between Ruth and Naomi, but also the relationship between Boaz and his workers, and Boaz and Ruth. So I want to urge people to really be thinking about this in this time in which the world seems so full of hate, so full of cruelty, so full of mean-spiritedness. We have power every single day to think about what do we do that increases the generosity of our actions, the kindness. How do we become more like Boaz or more like Ruth? Or honestly, more like Naomi? There's so many models here, I think, of great, deep, and meaningful human practice. So I'm going to stop there and see if there are any comments or questions for a few minutes. And if you want to speak, can you just raise your hand down at the bottom of the screen where it says raise hand? And if you have any comments or questions or reactions or thoughts, we're just going to take a few minutes. Folks in the
monitoring participants for you.
Harold is monitoring.
Waiting for the hands. I know I'll get some hands in a minute.
Rabbi Rodrick Young is here with us from England. So nice to see you, Bubala.
I don't know if they're like me. They still got the Kleenex. This is some story.
Yeah, it is. It's an amazing story. 4 short chapters. It's talk about great literature in deep religious. So it's okay if people don't feel like saying anything tonight. That's okay. We're going to end our time.
Rabbi, may I say something?
Oh yes, Rodrick, of course you may, but you didn't raise your hand.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I was, I'm useless with technology, and I was trying to unmute myself. So I remember years ago teaching at Tikkun at CBST, and I used Ruth as a healing text. I think it is just such a beautiful text for allowing us to express our emotions. When Naomi renames herself Mara, she has the right to say, I'm really pissed off. I'm incredibly bitter about what's happened to me. And then at the very end of the book, when she takes the baby in her arms and she calls herself Naomi, pleasantness again.
I
You know,
know.
and it's this idea that we have the right to express all our emotions, and as we do at CBST.
Yes, beautiful, as we do.
All right, Jonathan Adler.
One of my favorite things about Ruth is that Boaz describes her as an Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor, which we all know the phrase from Proverbs. It's the only time in Tanakh that a woman is actually described as an Eshet Chayil. And I think it's really beautiful to remember that it's all of these deeds of chesed that she does to Ruth, that Ruth does to Naomi, to Boaz, that earn her this extraordinary appellation. She's just such an incredible person.
Jonathan, that's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tanya Domi. Tanya Domi, are you there? Let's go to David Rosen while we're waiting for Tanya.
I think we lost her.
Yeah.
So further on in the story, Naomi takes the child that Ruth bore to Boaz and raises it as her own child. Why is that?
Well, why does she do that? It's part of the going around of this story of chesed and of loving kindness. Everybody steps up for each other at the moment that they're needed.
That is it for our hands, Rabbi.
All right, if Tanya Domi's not back, we'll wait. We're going to then end our time together with a beautiful musical version.
Rabbi, they just unmuted me.
Okay, great. Welcome.
First of all, I just want to say I love this teaching. Thank you so much. And I want to tell people how much I was struck by the kindness and generosity of CBST. The night I came, Rabbi, to do the military talk, I met with Rabbi Rapport and Stephen, the former cantor, and I was just struck, and I kept saying, why? They are so kind, they are so generous. And this is something that I have really grasped from Judaism. That is so beautiful. And I know that in a world that can be very cruel, and it is, this kindness and generosity is so powerful. And that is why I kept coming back.
That's so
I have to say that. I have to say that tonight. I mean, that is exactly why.
That is so beautiful. Okay, so we're going to end our time together with a setting that Joyce and Sam presented of the words, do not leave me, where you go, I will go, those words. And then folks at 10 o'clock, so everybody can take a little, go from here, you go into the Zoom room for the different classes. If you don't know where to go, I think we have I don't know, somebody could put in chat how people can find the Zoom room. There are 3 classes happening. Is somebody here who could describe what the 3 classes are for the first time, just so everybody, I don't have the list in front of me. Is Rabbi Rapport or Rabbi James here? Okay, it's all right. Everybody got that list. It should be, well, maybe Jason, you could put the list back up in the chat so people can see it. So
sure. After I put the video, you want me to put the...
Yeah, put the video up. So now these are the words of Ruth to Naomi, sung by Sam Rosen.
אל תבכי בי לעוזך לשוב מאחריי כי אל אשר תלכי אלך ובאשר תליני עלי עמך עמי ואלוהיך אשר תמותי אמות ושם אקבר. כה יעשה אדוני לי וכה יוסיף וכה יוסיף. כי המוות יפריד ביני
Thank you so much, Sam and Joyce. And I know in your session, you'll be teaching more about musical settings for that as well as other parts. So we've now in the chat got the chat. You go to cbst.org/Shavuot to get the full schedule and to get the Zoom links for the various fabulous classes. So see you later and see you in a class as we continue learning through this night of Shavuot. Well, hello, everybody. It's not the same as being all together when we would have our big blintz table and our big cheesecake table. I have to confess, I had my cheesecake already during one of the classes. Couldn't wait. Does anybody have any traditions other than cheesecake or blintzes for Shavuot? Anybody come with other traditions for foods that you consume on Shavuot? Do we have any? Yeah, when we did it together with CBST, remember we had the strawberries and the cheese, and we had that whole little buffet. Yum, yum, yum. Anyway, so welcome back, everybody, to our wrap up. So while we're letting people join us, so what do you think? Did you learn something new tonight? Was there something that you're taking away from Shavuot? So let's do a little, what are you taking away from tonight's learning? And the idea of taking one text and looking at it multiple times, hopefully in the course of the evening, for those for whom this might have been your first time encountering the text or some of these ideas. Is there something that struck you? For those of you for whom the text is more familiar, is there something that you're taking away from tonight into the rest of Shavuot and the rest of your time? So if anybody would want to speak, raise your hand, either down with the raise hand thingamajigger or raise your hand up like this. Yeah, let's hear how the evening was for you. And what are you taking away? What'd you learn? We had some very interesting different sessions. I was able to hop around to a few different ones. Okay, let's see. Do we have any? I can't. Yeah, where is everybody? Randy Axelrod.
Hi, Rabbi.
Hi, Randy.
I learned a lot, but what I'm taking away with me mostly is the music.
Mm-hmm.
It was just so beautiful and very simple, I thought. Not complicated, but poignant and amazing to me that, how you can take one phrase and just have so many different settings of it. I could have listened to Sam and Joyce
Forever.
for the whole night. Yeah.
Yes. Sam and Joyce, historically, Joyce has done, and Sam is, of course, newer to CBST, but has done that with all different kinds of things, like sometimes taken one prayer and kind of examined it from all different musical directions. But this text really lends it to that. And I agree, that was a really beautiful, very moving, and it's a fun way to kind of stay connected to the text and see the different ways that those who are using music use it to interpret the text. Thank you so much. Anybody else? Something that for a report on a session you went to? Either something you're taking away from it or something you learned tonight or you enjoyed listening to or being exposed to? Oh, don't be shy, folks. Mickey Dickinson. Or Randy Sarakoff.
Okay, it's Randy.
Randy.
I want
See,
to actually
I'm calling the word names up there. I'm trying to be.
Thank you. I just wanted to say to your first question, we have a new tradition that we started last year at remote Shavuot, which is to make regatta cheese with some tomatoes and basil and some olive tapenade and a little bit of sweet version of it as well. And this year, I was able to score a junior's cheesecake.
I don't know. Maybe when we're back together, you might have to prepare that for everybody. That looks delicious.
It would be my pleasure. That
would be really fun. Wonderful. Rabbi Kim Geringer.
Thanks. You know, I think I rethought about the story, the relationship of Ruth and Naomi, the powerful lens of what it means to be a mother-in-law or a daughter-in-law, of which I was one, a daughter-in-law, and I now am a mother-in-law.
Interesting.
And how, I mean, the potential in that relationship is enormous. It's incredibly complicated. The potential for resentment, for wanting to push away, for having to the challenge of negotiating the closeness, the possibilities of closeness in that relationship. I just really thought about it more deeply in that way. And it made me appreciate Ruth and Naomi's relationship even more because they were able to navigate.
Beautiful. That's so beautiful.
Through the potential conflict and difficulty to a place of so much love.
That's beautiful. Yeah, it is very moving. And it is so powerful to see ourselves in these texts and to get to the place in life where you're in positions you hadn't imagined, and to kind of see it with all that different frame. That's beautiful. Thank you. Anything else? We're asking anybody, teachers or students, if there anything that happened in your session or something that you're taking away from the Tikkun that was an insight for you. David Chapman.
Thanks, Rabbi. I was so moved in Dave's session about leaps of faith by so many folks that shared stories about gender transition and other personal transitions that they read into the story of Ruth. And it gives me a whole new way to look at that character and that text that I hadn't necessarily considered before. So I'm really moved by the generosity of so many folks that shared in that session.
Beautiful. That's so moving. And generosity is definitely a theme of this text and of this Yontif. That's beautiful. Thank you, Dave, for doing that teaching. Thank you. Judy Frank. Judy, are you there? You unmute. Judy, there you go. There you go. Excellent. Now we can hear you.
The gleanings. I thought it was stuff I could give away. And as somebody who likes to crochet, I have mountains of yarn. It seems like everybody who does knitting or crocheting has their stash of yarn that they'll never get to. I think I have enough for my whole life, you know. So I went quickly running to get a few yarns, and then it was gleanings from personal property. So I felt like so dumb, you know. It's like the gleanings that I have were stuff that I could get rid of without, you know, that somebody else used.
Interesting.
So I felt like a real dumbo, you know.
Wow, but that's so interesting, right? That's a very interesting point. Thank you so much, Max.
Thank you, Rabbi, and thank you everyone for that talk tonight. It was great just to hear so many different perspectives. And on the topic of gleaning, Deborah's session earlier was just a fun little activity just to kind of move around and kind of evaluate some of the things that you have around your apartment. We were gleaning traditions to fill our basket. And it was just beautiful to hear it do like a show and tell with everyone, and just the things that they picked up that were from, you know, the last 90 days of their lives, or the last, 15, 20 years or beyond. It was really nice and beautiful to get a little bit of dimension and be in each other's apartments.
Beautiful. What a lovely and beautiful way to relate to the text and to our unique, although maybe it's not so unique anymore, right? Of being together in these Zoom boxes where we're three-dimensional in our homes and in our lives, but two-dimensional to each other. Thank you, Deborah, for that beautiful teaching. Anybody else? And for those who joined, we're just asking if people want to report either on what they learned tonight, or if was there something that they're bringing away from their learnings from the Shavuot of these different sessions that we had together. We had really beautiful sessions. Stacy Harris.
Did I unmute?
Yes, we can hear you, Stacy.
Oh, okay, that's good. I attended both Joyce and Sam's class and Rabbi Rapport's class. And in each class, it was just, by the time I finished Joyce and Sam's class, it was like an arc, that feelings that I went through. And I can't exactly explain it, but there's just something it's stuck inside. It's stuck inside in a good way. And with Rabbi Yael's class, the last poem that she put on was a Marge Piercy poem that I never heard of before. And it was about the relationship between mother-daughter and mother-in-law, etc. And I was like, wow, it's the strength and I had something like that with someone that was almost my mother-in-law, and it was, to this day, I will always love her. She will always be my second mother.
Beautiful. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you so much. Carol Feynman.
Okay. First of all, this was just an amazing evening. And I have to say, for me, it was much better with Zoom, because if I had to go to CBST, I wouldn't make it, not this late. This way, at least if I fall asleep, it's on my recliner. But, but one thing that was said, Rabbi, actually, in your presentation, which was like sheer genius, and you were reading from the text, and Boaz said, well, for all your wonderful work, I'm going to make sure the men do not molest you. Well, they should be molesting women anyway. And it sort of makes you, you wonder about the great respect for women we all hear about.
Well, that is a huge topic, and you're absolutely right. We're talking about a patriarchal society in which women were property and were often abused and molested. And guess what? How much has changed, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, unfortunately, we can't just say that's some kind of historical nugget that we could look back at and say, wow, that was a weird aspect of society that one would have to say, don't molest, don't hurt women. Yeah, what can I say, Carol? You're absolutely right. Rebecca Rosenbaum.
I was listening so hard, I forgot what I was going to say, but everything was great. Can you hear me? Should I
Yes,
unmute
we
myself?
can hear you, Rebecca.
Oh, okay, I have to tell you, you look fantastic. Your hair.
Thank you.
I tell you, your hair looks fantastic. Everybody
This
looks
is
fantastic.
still my Acadia Zoom haircut. So this is my 10-year-old great niece did this haircut. So just letting you know, okay? So I have gotten more comments. So there you go. I saved a lot of money on this in this pandemic, I got to say.
Yeah, well, I did my own hair during the pandemic.
Okay.
But anyway, everything was really good. I guess I remembered what I wanted to say is that my experience is that whatchamacallit, in-law relationships are really, really complicated and hard.
Mm-hmm.
And dealing with in-laws is really hard. And dealing with in-laws post-mortem of the person who made you an in-law is really, really hard. And the story is like stunningly unique and amazing. And I pop in and out of a whole lot of different widow groups on Facebook, and everybody fetches about their relationship with their in-laws. And if
Uh-huh.
you could give them a little teaching of Ruth, maybe
Uh-huh.
it would be a real gift to all the widows of the world. They'd feel better, you know. But it's incredible to find an optimistic story about a relationship of a daughter-in-law and the mother-in-law post-mortem of the husband. It's just, well, I don't know, maybe they exist in other cultures. I'd be interested in is there anything anywhere like the Book of Ruth in Moab or Montana?
Well, in other ancient Near East or in modern literature, I do not know. That'd be an interesting question. I don't. Maybe others in our room tonight have thoughts. But Rabbi James, tell us, how did the blintzes go? I see Rabbi James is in the kitchen. So Rabbi James, give us a report from the kitchen.
We had a wonderful group of, actually everybody was making blintzes along. And I wish I could just like hand one of these to you.
Whoa, that looks so delicious.
They're really pretty. And we've got, Barbara just ate the first two.
And what's Barbara's report?
It led to extreme religious elevation.
Extreme religious elevation from eating a blintz. That's pretty high praise.
Yeah.
Wow. So yeah, I can't wait that you would do that for us in person. I'm very jealous. Well, that's wonderful.
We were talking about that.
Did anybody who came to yours, was this their first time making a blintz? Was it the first time for anybody?
I am not sure if it was, I think it was the first time. Andrew, is Andrew there? Oh, I don't think Andrew's there. I think it might have been Andrew's first time making a blintz. I mean, Karen was back again from last year and just zoomed ahead of the class this time and was eating them before the rest of us finished, which is amazing. And Elizabeth, they may not be as good as your grandmother's, but I bet they're delicious. And I bet they're going to be better this year than last year. So, come again next year. Maybe we'll be in the kitchen.
Excellent. And Rabbi Rapport she's sticking with chocolate ice cream as your dairy offering. Okay, that's nice. That's very
It's Grater's ice cream. I don't know if anybody has Midwest roots, but this is a very important ice cream.
What is it? I've never heard of it.
Grater's.
Love Grater's ice cream.
Oprah says it's like one of life's most important experiences. And since we're talking about her namesake tonight.
Yeah, I've never heard of that ice cream, but Oprah, right? That's right. Oprah was named for Orpah, right? So what's that story, Rabbi Rapport? You want to tell us that?
No, I don't know the story of how she got her name. I just saw it somewhere and it stuck with me. But yes, you can get it at Fairway, and sometimes you can get it at D'Agostino's. And it is the world's greatest ice cream. I am completely biased.
Wow, I'm impressed. All right, any last thoughts or reflections on what you learned tonight or something you're taking away from our Tikkun? We continue in our CBST. There are various Tikkunim happening around the globe for people to jump into. Feel free to continue your all-night study if you're up for that or whatever time zone you're in. I know in New York, the JCC of Manhattan is having an all-night Tikkun, and folks can jump over there if you want to continue your learning. If people have other all-night tikkunim that you want to recommend, you could put it in the chat. Tomorrow afternoon, Rabbi James is doing an in-person text study in northern Manhattan outside that you have to register for. I'm not sure if that registration is still open. That might have closed. Yes, that registration has closed. But Tuesday morning, which is the second day of Shavuot, I will be leading with Sam. Am I leading with you?
Yes.
And who's giving the Devar Torah? David Deed is giving the Devar Torah, and we're going to read the Book of Ruth, and we're going to also recite Yizkor for the holiday of which we do on Shavuot. So that's 9:30. Is that right? 9:30 on Tuesday morning. And that will be a beautiful service for the second day. and there'll be lots of learning and singing and davening together. So that will be our second day service. Anything else on the announcements? Any other announcements? Nope. All right, my friends, many blessings for revelation to continue, for truth and kindness and deep relationships to continue to bless your every step. Chag Sameach, everybody. Chag Sameach. Chag Shavuot Sameach. Zman Matan Toratenu. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining us.